Hello and welcome to Health and Wellness, your guide to the integrated personal and financial retirement journey for physicians. I'm your host, Michael Swartz, Certified Financial Planner and Master Certified Physician Development Coach. Welcome back to the Health and Wellness Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Chris Miller. She is an Internal Medicine Emeritus at Gunderson Health Systems here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. She is a physician development coach with advanced coaching credentials through the International Coaching Federation. And Chris, we'll just start out right here at the top. Also, the co-founder and co-host of Honoring Onward, the physician retirement program that we started here at Gunderson Health Systems in La Crosse. So with that, Chris, welcome to the Health and Wellness Podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for inviting the others along with us on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I want to start by acknowledging what we talked about before the recording started. And this is an invitation to really for the listeners to bear witness to a conversation, not just from our heads, but maybe from a deeper spot. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that and what our hope is for the listeners here today?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking a little bit about marketing, and I want to bring you back to a conversation we had when we were going to market our program. And we have a very heartfelt logo for our program. I think you would agree with that. And when we were going to market it, it was going to be um, that logo was going to be taken away for just a regular old green and blue and whatever else was going to be on there. And we said to our partner, um, that, if we use that, if we use that as opposed to this logo that we have, this program is about attracting hearts and intuition and instinct. And our logo, that's what that invites, is that the very heart of people. And I feel that that is almost a prototype that we followed. So we were allowed to have our heart logo, and I think consequently, it invites the hearts of our participants from the very beginning. When they see that logo, when they see that postcard, when they see, um, and so we were heard. We were heard, and our logo stood as it was. They heard us say that this was a heart journey, and we, in the midst of the fast-paced world that our healthcare providers live in, it was very important that they knew from the very beginning that this would be a heart journey. And so, yeah, our conversation started out today, even in this podcast, that we're welcoming people with our open hearts, and we ask them to listen from their hearts to this podcast.
Absolutely. And, I shared with you that the welcome is usually energetic and it feels a bit markety. I wanted to address that with you too. It's an invitation to welcome people, but at the same time, it can feel very corporate. And that's what happened with the logo. It was essentially whitewashed and redesigned and said, nope, we're going to use the corporate logos here for this promotion. And it was a lot of strength and resolve from you to say, if we do run the corporate marketing model with the corporate marketing brand, it's going to detract from what this journey is really about. And so the entire retirement journey isn't just a professional journey, it's a personal journey too. And that's where that heart really comes into play.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's also what this podcast wants to welcome, is the heart of people to our own hearts, because this has certainly been a heart-led journey for both of us.
Absolutely. And that's what we bring to the retirement coaching is an invitation to rekindle that spirit and rekindling because, over the course of the career for a physician, that flame can be a little bit muffled or stifled. And so would you feel open to talking about your professional journey first and sharing what that did to your heart journey as well?
Yeah, that's a big one. I feel that in medicine, we're often asked to cut off our heads from our hearts as we enter the door, particularly, that would have been 34, 35 years ago. And and we're very led by the external guidelines, timelines, bottom lines. And doesn't take very long before we start thinking that that's our compass, are these external factors that we need to produce, we need to follow, we need to keep up. And so consequently, it's again very easy to lose your own compass, which is guided by heart, values, purpose, and so as much as I wanted to stay connected to that, the drum beats are very loud. The drum beats are very loud, and it's taken quite a concerted effort on my part to reconnect with my heart and to I don't know that I was ever totally disconnected from my heart, but it had to go underground. Let's put it that way. It had to go underground. And so my journey towards reconnecting is more raising my consciousness of what I needed to do going forward in my career. And I really think that one of the biggest times in my career, one of the biggest changes, I guess two big things. First of all, I was asked to be medical director of our addictions program. And although I said no, I was asked 3 times and I said no twice. It was one of the best decisions I made because that was one place in medicine at that time that actually, the spirit was important, in the 5 steps, the 12 steps, the spirit's important, the higher power is important. As well, it gave me education about stages of change and walking in the other person's shoes. And so my whole career, I learned to really listen to what my patient was saying to me. And so that skill was very important, that stages of change and engagement and motivation, rather than telling them, hearing where they were starting and going from there. So that kept me grounded, I would have to say, for many years. I would have to say the other big change was when Eastern medicine really started holding hands with Western medicine. And so Eastern medicine is primarily focused on the internal, how the person can heal themselves, what energy do they have inside, what, how can they use their own hearts, how can they use their intuition. And with that exploration on my part of both meditation as well as mindfulness, as well as yoga, my pockets became very much deeper towards being able to connect um, connect the people with their own hearts, hear who they were, hear what skills they needed in order to really attach back to their own compasses and their own values and what they wanted out of this sickness, suffering, health, death, dying that we were working with our patients. So those were two key points in keeping me connected to my heart and to my inside.
So it sounds like throughout your career, you always followed this intuition that was within you. And you mentioned too, for many physicians, they're really asked to separate that part of their being with their mind. And whether that's bottom lines or timelines or the pace of patient care, the external demands just growing. I mean, I have to imagine every physician that's listening out there is probably nodding their head in their car or on their jog, just saying, I feel that. And maybe there's this sense of grief or shame about losing that connection with the heart. And since we are showing up here authentically, Chris, I'm wondering if we can go there and talk a little bit about what that can lead to, that sense of disconnect from your internal compass and how that, affects a physician's career.
Mhm. Well, again, that's a very good question, and it certainly um, gets to the heart of maybe what, that moral injury that we experience. And maybe some of that moral injury is also because we don't allow ourselves to grieve and the loss. We often don't even recognize it. And um, it's it's taken me quite some time to reconcile with myself that loss. And and before the reconciliation, which I think is still going on because again, I didn't have the the support. I didn't have the internal confidence to stay connected like I would want to. So it's taken quite a while to kind of forgive myself. So you speak about that shame, and I think that's where shame comes in, is kind of the denial that I'm human or that we're human, and that I did the best I could. I did the best I could as a um, raising two young children, having one child in medical school and another child in residency, and being, some of the first women to be trying to do all of that. Um, but also other people that, might have that same, they come into medicine and want to do so good and want to help so many people, only to all of a sudden be tired and to be feel somewhat lost and um, not always having the again, that compass keeps coming back to me, the radar, to know what's going on. So it's often very easy to point finger back at our own selves and say we did something wrong. We it was our fault. And so I think that is a process that needs to be looked at, that grief and that shame. I think that um, on our retiring journey, you and I have talked about the grief that's important to also acknowledge. And I do find, even with some of my clients, that even speaking that word grief is almost freeing because they haven't looked at it like that. They haven't even known that grief's existed. So I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely it did, Chris, because I think you put the elements in play here. Physicians come into practicing medicine with their heart first. Most make a conscious decision from their heart. That compass leads them into healthcare because they have an aptitude for science, but more importantly, it's a role that connects with the patient. And that's kind of that vocational calling into practicing medicine. And what the expectations are in the early years change over time over the course of their career. I don't want to mix words here, but I don't want to be too negative either. But the environment of healthcare has changed over the physician's career. And with that, humans are adaptable. And so we make sacrifices of ourselves for our families or for our careers. And it's very easy for compassionate and empathetic people to be first willing to sacrifice themselves. And so one thing that you and I have talked about is sacrificing and making, it causes a rusting of that internal compass. We adopt the values of the healthcare system. Our role becomes our identity. And as we approach retirement, and while we are retiring, there's this amazing opportunity to start reflecting on some of these things and healing some of the wounds of the career and really rejuvenating that same heartfelt conviction for your career so you can come full circle, if you will, and close the arc of your career successfully. And that's going to mean something different to everyone. But I would love if you could share, Chris, your process for closure and some of the things that you did towards the end of your career. You mentioned it was a decade-long process.
Mhm.
What did that closure look like? What did that healing look like? What did that airing out, that introspection, and who was helping you do that? I know the answer to that question, but who was helping you in your journey for the end towards the end of your career?
Yeah, I think the other thing that just I will answer that, I think to set it in context as well, when you said about that we'll sacrifice ourselves first. I think that that's one of the biggest things that I wish I had known differently as far as healing. We are taught from the very beginning to serve others, to help others, to take care of others, almost as if healing is a one-way street. We give out and we give out. And it's not until in these later years that I found out true healing is a two-way street. And healing comes back to us in that two-way street with self-compassion. So the one-way street, which is a dead end, we get tired, we get hollow, we get disconnected, we get, sometimes bitter or resentful, or just again, just bored. And so the antidote that I have found for that, making that one-way street, that dead end, into a true healer is that self-compassion, which brings back this full circle. I'm wounded, I heal, I'm wounded. And the person sitting before me, whether it be you or one of my patients or one of my clients, we're together. We're together in that healing process. And that, I guess that probably is only in these last years, probably these last 3 to 4 years, even after I retired, that I really was able to articulate that. And that then needed to be more self-compassionate to myself, that I didn't know that before. I wasn't taught that. And so yeah, my journey with retirement probably took place about 10 years before I retired. Again, I think I have been gifted with more self-awareness and living deep. And despite all the deflections and side roads that I took in medicine, um, and 10 years before I really decided about maybe had my wake up call. We call them wake up calls. I had a health crisis, and I thought, hmm, health, what am I doing against myself? What am I doing? And that's when that journey of um, self-healing began, and realizing this was going to take me, and also realizing that for some reason I realized that at the end of my career, if it I love medicine. I love medicine. I don't think to me, it's like being, when I'm with my patients, it was always like donning my robes, and it was like being with like a priest, priestess, and very sacred time. And I knew, and just the exploration of how that illness or how their health was affecting them, their stories, their who they were, that they showed me, full face. I mean, the vulnerability is unequaled in my life. And so I just thought, what am I going to do to have something as meaningful as this degree of this interaction that I'm having with these marvelous human beings and their stories of their lives. So that became that internal journey, and that's when I started meditating very consciously and specifically, and mindfulness. Mindfulness grew. And then I wanted to take my meditation out from the mat, and then did yoga. And the only way I could do yoga was to take my yoga teacher training. So at age 63, 62, I was taking my 200-hour yoga teacher training in order to um, open this world that I needed to open after retirement. And yoga and meditation gave me keys to worlds I would never have had, to people that I've met. The teacher that I had in my yoga teacher training was the best teacher I've ever had, as far as teaching me about how to teach. And then I also had some of my own coaching. Um, I met my coach at a women's conference, and I walked in, I was late. It was in Chicago. I was late, and so I walked in with my street clothes, but I thought I wanted to hear this. And here lo and behold, she was giving a talk on the imposter syndrome. And I went up to her afterwards and just burst out crying and said, "You know me. How do you know me?" And thus became a relationship between us. And so between meditation, mindfulness, yoga, and coaching, I was able to get back to the straight and narrow of my heart, and create, with all my heart and soul. The other piece I would have to say, Michael, you'll be interested in this, is that probably about 3 years before, I was talking to my financial person, and who I really, really liked and honored. And I said, "Patrick, if what happened, when are you going to retire?" Because I mean, he seemed like he was about my age. And he said, "Chris, you don't have to worry. Our company has a policy that we give you a 2-year notice. And in that 2-year notice, we develop a plan. We develop a succession plan for me, who's going to take over." So I thought, oh my goodness, that's quite, that really made me feel, really secure. But then I thought, I've been seeing patients, human beings, sickness, suffering, health, death, dying for 25, 30 years. We have no plan.
Hmm.
We have no plan. It's They get a letter from maybe my secretary. Um, I don't talk to them. So that became a very, very conscious effort at 3 years to start laying the groundwork for my patients and for myself, how I was going to part from them, and how I was going to part my last day. So you can see the thread, Michael, of very intentionality. I was very intent, and I was very intent that this separation, this stopping with my patients was going to be respectful, was going to be as noble as us starting. I was going to respect their um, grief, their fears in having to start with somebody new. I was going to honor that and take time. Well, that also took a lot of intentionality because, as you can imagine, the drum beats don't stop. So the visits remain the same, the length of time, and yet with all those visits, those last 2 years, I was also having to say goodbye and allow their. I strongly felt that I needed to allow their hearts and souls into that. So that takes time. You don't just say goodbye to somebody that you've known for 20 years. 25 years easily. And so that became very intentional, um, as well as there were 5 people that retired with me, and we were all having the same experience. We didn't know what to do. But I developed a letter for my patients. I hand wrote, I signed that letter, hand signed the letter. And of course, I had a lot fewer patients by the end of that second year, because patients had, needed to move on to other physicians. Um, it became very intentional. And I think I've shared this with you before that last year, I actually looked at it as a pilgrimage to keep my heart connected with my head because I knew the drum beat was going to get very large, even stronger. As well, I was saying goodbye to 6 and 7, 8 people every day, which is very tiring. And those days became long again. Well into the 7 o'clocks again, to wrap up and to get them new plans, etc. So uh, again, it was a very intentional last year, every day, realizing how I was being pulled away, and how I needed to stay on my sacred ground. Um, Again, some of that is just that yoga, that mindfulness, that meditation, coaching. The support I had, Michael, to keep connected was not just with myself. And I would have to say, you know, um, my husband is the proverbial wind beneath my wings. The sayings every morning, inspirations and things like that. Definitely, I had support at home as well to do that.
Well, there's a lot in that story, Chris, and the highlights that I heard were, 10 years out, you got this wake up call. And it may not always be physical health, it may be emotional health or relational health too. But these wake up calls are kind of omnipresent in that retirement journey, and they call us to take that active role in retiring. And many times, and as we've seen even in the group coaching that we've done, we can sort of live in denial of that. And I say we as collectively as physicians, right? And to say solely focused on your career, it potentially forfeits a lot of this opportunity to say these longer form goodbyes. And you said, no, 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 we're not going towards this retirement cliff. We're going to take some intentional steps through the decade leading up to the day you retire. And this is an invitation for everyone to say, what do you want in the final years, 5 to even a decade long, and at the end of your career to make this closure meaningful and with reverence and from your heart? How do you bring meaningful closure to your career? And you don't need to do it alone. I think we've seen it so many times in healthcare, even in our first meeting with our current group. One of the key takeaways was life is finite, and we are not alone in this retirement journey. But it's so easy to believe that, especially for physicians who are so narrowly focused on their patient panel. And you mentioned for years and years, the number of patients did not go down, but you took it upon yourself to manufacture and then invest the time to make this transition so meaningful. And so to celebrate that with you now, Chris, it was a pilgrimage. You took that upon yourself to make that happen. And I saw some glowing and some posture and smiling on your face to say, I did this.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
did
yeah,
this for me.
yeah.
And
And for
I
my
hope,
patients, yeah.
and so yeah, for your patients too, I hope that the people that are listening here take that as permission to start doing that work for their own retirement journey so that it is manageable. And that's not to say it will make it easy. We're processing grief here. We're saying goodbye. You mentioned 25 to 30 years worth of relationships in some cases. That's a magnanimous transition.
Mhm.
It's unlike any other, and we talk about that. And it's one of a kind. It's the final arc of your career, and how can you do anything but give it the reverence it deserves? But no one's built that yet, and I think that's really that's a wonderful stopping point here for our first episode and a great teaser for our next conversation because we get to talk about what you did on the day you retired and how you transitioned, and then talk about what we've built to help physicians close their career and start putting some meaningful thought and action into their process of retiring.
Yeah.
So as we close out the reflection on your career and leading up to here the end of it, Chris, is there anything else you'd like to share with the physicians who could benefit from your story and your message?
Well, first of all, I do want to say, if you're finding yourself 2 and 3 years out of retiring, don't panic.
Hmm.
Um, I happen to have that gift of 10 years and the gift of kind of that self-awareness. Um, and I believe the gift was given to me in order to give back to my colleagues and to create a livable, breathable structure. I remember, I firmly believe that retirement is one of the noblest parts of our careers as physicians. And that brings tears to my eyes when I truly mean that from the bottom of our hearts. And it was what motivated us so strongly with our first group. We felt we were in service to them and to their great, noble journeys. I remember when I met you, one of the big things that motivated you was realizing how many physicians were going to retire and yet how unprepared. And you saw it as a humanitarian crisis. I remember you used that word. And so again, I didn't even speak of, our relationship factoring into in my retiring, but that when I heard you say that humanitarian crisis, it was so validating for me, validating for the physicians I had seen retire. One of our VPs, when I was talking to them about this program, he had not heard some of these words before, this, some of this structure before. And he said, Chris, I'm kind of curious now when I think back on physicians that have retired and then 6 months later, a year later, they come back and want to come back. I usually don't have the place for them, but I almost see that I'm kind of curious now, he said, whether they probably weren't done. They had not completed their arc. They
Mhm.
had not given themselves that opportunity for closure. So whether you're 10 years away, whether you're 5 years away, we're working with people now 2 years and 1 year away. Your ability to bring meaning and pause. We talk about the great pause of retiring, of deciding it's time to start thinking about retiring. There's a great in breath and pause to and again there are structures Here's one right here. Michael's podcast, his own health and wellness, and our honoring onward that can provide some of that structure. And yes, I would love to talk further about that, but I did want to, for those people that are closer, I wanted to be sure that they knew that they could still bring such meaning and enclosure to their own careers, even if they're 6 months out. We have somebody now that's 6 months out and is looking forward to what she can glean from this in order to make her time and her ending a closure so that there can be that opening to that new beginning.
Well, and I'll echo that, Chris, because in the health and wellness book, it does say in black and white there is no right time, and so that comes right back to the start of our conversation, with that self-compassion and that grace for yourself to say there's no right timeline here,
Mhm,
but we'll work with the time that we have.
mhm.
And that's just a beautiful offering of grace. And so, you mentioned the VP, and I know I've spoken with the former CEO, and yeah, there really is no structure in place. And so to say I really couldn't have done things differently, but now I can. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I think a great intro as we close out our first conversation to really get you guys excited as listeners about the next conversation, where we really start talking about some of these solutions that you implemented in your retirement, and the solutions that we're building to help physicians transition. So with
Yeah.
that, Chris, I'd love to invite you with any closing words here before we say goodbye for the first time, and before we say welcome back to the next conversation.
Yeah, just thank you again, Michael. Thank you um, for leading and for leading this podcast and leading from your heart. Like I told you, when I first met you, I knew that you had the heart of a coach, and that's why I decided to work with you. And so uh, I just imagine the people listening. And thank you for listening, whoever listened. Thank you for listening, and we're here for you. If you have questions, either one of us are here for you, and please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. We'd be more than happy to talk to you individually or talk to you about our program too.
And so if you are looking to find it on healthwellness.com/coaching, you'll find a link to Dr. Miller's profile as well as mine. And so if you have any interest in learning more about this coaching program, absolutely. We can be a resource. We can share with you what we've learned. I love that invitation, Chris, because yeah, it kind of raises the question, where do we go from here? And that's a
Yeah, yeah,
perfect way to leave off.
yeah. All right, all right. Well, thank you, Michael, and many blessings on your continued journey.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Health and Wellness Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Swartz, Certified Financial Planner and Master Certified Physician Development Coach. If you're looking for additional resources for integrated physician retirement planning, please visit healthandwellness.com. We'll see you in the next episode.